Pack up our daughter and go to your mom's. My ex and her kids are moving in, she's going through a rough time, my husband shouted, dragging out the suitcase. But he didn't see that my brother and his friend were already standing behind him. But before we go on, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Sienna started to notice it gradually, like a subtle shift in Caleb's voice, a flicker of something dark in his eyes when she asked questions. At first, she thought it was just exhaustion, stress from work. Caleb had always been a bit distant, a bit withdrawn. But lately, that distance had turned into something almost physical. It felt like he was building a wall between them. The evenings they used to spend curled up on the couch, talking about their day or making plans for the future, had turned into quiet coexistence. Caleb would scroll through his phone, avoiding eye contact, while Sienna sat there feeling a growing unease, a cold tightness creeping around her heart. The first real red flag came when Caleb started getting frequent phone calls from an unknown number. He'd catch her looking, then quickly step out of the room to answer. When Sienna asked who it was, he'd brush it off with, "Just work. Nothing important." But she knew that wasn't true. She could feel it in her gut. One day, while Caleb was in the shower, his phone rang again. Curiosity mixed with a rising sense of dread took over. Sienna glanced at the screen. Delilah. Her heart skipped a beat. Delilah, Caleb's ex-wife. The woman he almost never mentioned. Sienna knew Delilah had 2 kids from Caleb, and of course he had to support them financially. But lately, while looking through their bank statements, Sienna had noticed strange transfers to an unknown account. The amounts weren't huge, but they were regular. And whenever she asked Caleb about them, he'd fumble through vague excuses about helping old friends or paying off debts. But she knew he was lying. One night, after their daughter had gone to sleep, Sienna sat down next to Caleb on the couch and took his hand. "What's going on?" she asked softly. "I feel like you're hiding something from me." Caleb sighed and looked away. "It's nothing. Just a lot going on at work. Please don't lie to me. I saw the calls from Delilah. And the transfers. Where's that money going?" Caleb's face tensed. "Why are you making this a thing? Delilah's going through a tough time. She lost her job, she's struggling with housing. Those kids are still mine, I have to help." Sienna felt a wave of anger rising in her chest. Helping your kids is one thing. But what's really going on? Why is she calling you every day? Why are you sending her money and hiding it from me? "I told you, she needs help," he snapped. "I'm just getting her through this rough patch. It's under control. Don't worry." "Under control," he said, but Sienna didn't believe a word of it. She felt like everything was slipping away, her life, her family, everything she had worked so hard to build. For the next few days, Sienna lived on edge. She tried to act normal, cooking dinner, taking care of Caleb, but inside, she was spiraling. She didn't know what to think, who to trust. She felt betrayed, lied to, humiliated. Caleb grew more and more irritable. He'd snap over the smallest things, yell at their daughter, lash out at Sienna. She knew he was struggling too, that guilt was eating away at him, but that didn't make her pain any less real. Then one evening, after an especially tense day, Caleb said something that broke her completely. Sienna would never forget that moment. They were having dinner. Their daughter was chatting excitedly about something, and Caleb just sat there, silent, staring at his plate. Suddenly, he looked up and said, "I need to talk to you." Sienna felt a chill run through her. She knew something terrible was coming. "Delilah, she's in a really bad place right now. She got evicted. She has nowhere to go. And the kids, they're still so little." Sienna stayed quiet, waiting for what he'd say next. "I was thinking," Caleb hesitated, avoiding her eyes. Maybe they could stay with us for a while." Sienna froze. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. What? She whispered. Just temporarily, until she finds something. It won't be long. What am I supposed to do, let them live on the street? Sienna jumped up from her chair. Are you out of your mind? She shouted. You're seriously suggesting your ex-wife and her kids move into our home? Our home. Do you even hear yourself? Can you not yell, please? I explained, it's only temporary. Temporary? And what about me? What about our daughter? Where are we supposed to go? Caleb shrugged. And just like that, the ground fell out from under her. He really said it. He had actually asked his own wife, the mother of his child, to leave their home to make room for his ex. In that moment, Sienna knew it was over. There was nothing left between them. Caleb had betrayed her in the most humiliating way. She looked at him, and there was no love left in her eyes, only frozen hatred. The next day, after the fight, Caleb walked quietly into the bedroom. Sienna stood by the window, her face unreadable. He didn't look at her, like he was afraid of seeing what he already knew deep down, that he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I've been thinking, he started. His voice felt too loud in the silence of the house. Maybe you could stay at your mom's for a bit. I mean, you know how hard things are for Delilah right now, and... Sienna turned to face him slowly. There were no tears, no shouting. Just a cold, burning emptiness in her eyes. Hard times, she repeated quietly. You mean like when you started sending her all the money we've been saving for our vacation? Or when you looked me in the eye and lied while I tried to make sense of what was happening? Caleb hesitated, his face flushing. Come on, don't start, he muttered. I told you, it's just temporary. She needs help. Help? Sienna's voice rose, sharp and shaking now. You want to bring her and her kids into this house? The house my mother bought so we could have a home. Are you serious? Caleb, as if he hadn't heard a word she said, walked over to the closet and started yanking her clothes out, tossing them onto the bed. Don't yell, he snapped. I've got enough on my plate. Just pack up. Sienna stood there, stunned. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. What are you doing? She whispered, watching her dresses, her blouses, pieces of her life, piled carelessly in a heap. I'm packing your stuff, Caleb said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Take your daughter and go stay with your mom. My ex and the kids will be staying here. The words hit like a sentence. Sienna felt her whole world collapse. Everything she believed in, everything she thought was solid, crumbled to dust. You're kicking me out. The words barely left her mouth. Caleb didn't answer. He just kept pulling things out of the closet like he was clearing out junk. Sienna stood frozen, unable to move. One thought kept echoing in her mind, how could he? Suddenly, the front door swung open, and two men stepped inside. One of them was Milo, Sienna's brother. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a determined look on his face. Behind him was a man Sienna didn't recognize, dressed professionally and holding a folder. Caleb turned from the closet, confused at first, then irritated. Milo? What the hell are you doing here? And who's this guy? Milo ignored his tone and walked calmly into the room. This is my colleague. He's a lawyer. We're here because of the current situation. Caleb scowled. What situation? Everything's fine. No, Caleb, Milo said firmly. Nothing about this is fine. He walked over to his sister, wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and looked Caleb straight in the eye. You're making a huge mistake. Sienna felt her brother's support like a lifeline. She straightened up and looked Caleb in the eye, no longer afraid. Milo nodded to the lawyer, who stepped forward and held out a folded document. Here, the lawyer said calmly. This is a notice of divorce, a claim for child support, and a formal demand for your eviction from this property. Caleb took the paper with trembling hands. He unfolded it and scanned the contents, his face turning redder by the second. "What the hell is this?" he growled, looking up at Sienna. "You're filing for divorce?" Sienna said nothing, but her eyes told him everything. "Yes, Caleb," Milo answered for her. "Sienna's done putting up with your betrayal and your lies. And by the way," he added, pausing, "this house belongs to Sienna. It was bought with her mother's money and registered in her name. So legally, you're nobody here." Caleb went pale. He looked down at the paper again, as if hoping it would somehow contradict Milo's words. "I won't let this happen," he shouted. "I won't allow it." "You will," Milo replied calmly. "You don't have a choice. We have all the paperwork proving this house belongs to Sienna. And if you don't leave on your own, we'll take it to court." This has to be some kind of mistake," Caleb mumbled, crumpling the divorce notice in his hands. "Sienna, we're a family. A real family doesn't build its happiness on someone else's misery, Caleb," Sienna said quietly. There was no malice in her voice, no satisfaction, just exhaustion and deep, bitter disappointment. "You destroyed our family the moment you decided Delilah's problems mattered more than I did." Caleb's face twisted with rage. He threw the paper to the floor and clenched his fists. You planned this. You've always hated me." "No, Caleb," Sienna answered, her voice low and steady. "You planned this. You ruined everything, with your lies, your selfishness, your betrayal." Milo stepped forward, positioning himself between Caleb and Sienna. "That's enough, Caleb," he said firmly. "You're leaving this house. The sooner, the better." Caleb, realizing he'd lost, deflated. Confusion and desperation filled his eyes. "Where am I supposed to go?" he whispered. "That's not our problem," Milo said sharply. "You have 5 days to pack up and get out. After that, we'll call the police." Sienna looked at Caleb without pity, without spite. She just felt relief. Like a massive weight had finally lifted from her shoulders. She was no longer tied to this man, to his lies and his betrayals. She was free. Milo walked over and hugged his sister. "You're going to be okay," he whispered. "We've got you." Sienna nodded, feeling hope begin to return. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. She had family, friends, a job. She had a life, and she intended to live it with dignity. Caleb stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by things he could no longer call his own, and suddenly realized what he'd done. He had lost everything, his family, his home, his respect, all because of his stupidity, his selfishness, his weakness. But it was too late now. He'd made his choices, and all that was left was to face the consequences. He sank into a chair, his legs no longer able to hold him. He still couldn't believe it had come to this. How could he have been so blind? How could he have put Delilah, and all her endless chaos, ahead of Sienna, the woman who loved him, stood by him, believed in him? Images flickered through his mind. Cozy nights. Trips they took. Sienna's laughter. It all felt distant now, unreachable, like scenes from someone else's life. "But where will I go?" he whispered, looking up at Milo. "I have no home." "That's your problem, Caleb," Milo said coldly. "It's time you finally take responsibility for your own actions." He signaled to the other man, the one Sienna hadn't seen before. The man pulled a notepad and pen from his bag. "We're beginning inventory of all property owned by Sienna," Milo announced. "Please don't interfere." Caleb watched helplessly as Milo and his assistant moved through the house, methodically documenting everything that had been bought with Sienna's money or belonged to her before the marriage. Furniture, appliances, paintings, dishes, Everything that once made this place feel like home was now reduced to a cold inventory list proving Sienna's claim. He tried to protest when Milo got to his computer, insisting it was his work device. That computer was bought with money Sienna inherited from her grandmother, Milo replied without even looking up. You have 5 days to provide proof otherwise. Caleb fell silent. He knew Milo was right. He had always been good at talking his way out of difficult situations, but now, standing across from this calm, composed man, he felt small and powerless. Sienna stood quietly, watching it all unfold. There was no satisfaction on her face, no sense of victory. Just deep exhaustion and the desperate wish for it all to be over. She felt sorry for Caleb, but that pity couldn't outweigh the pain and betrayal he'd caused. When the inventory was complete, Milo handed Caleb a copy of the list. Here. You've got 5 days to remove anything that doesn't belong to Sienna. If you don't, we'll call the bailiffs. Caleb took the paper with trembling hands. He understood, this was the end. The end of his marriage, the end of his carefree life, the end of any hope that things would somehow fix themselves. Milo turned to Sienna and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Let's go. You need rest. Mom's waiting. Sienna nodded and walked out without a single glance back at Caleb. Milo followed, leaving him alone in a cold, empty house full of memories and regret. The next 5 days passed like a nightmare for Caleb. He tried calling Sienna, begging her to talk, to forgive him. She never answered. He even went to her mother, hoping she might convince Sienna to give him another chance. But the woman, usually warm and kind, met him with a cold, stern expression. You did this to yourself, Caleb, she said. Sienna loved you deeply, but you broke her trust. Now she needs to live her own life. Desperate, Caleb reached out to Delilah, hoping she might at least offer some comfort. But Delilah was wrapped up in her own chaos, complaining about money, unruly kids, not having a place to stay. Caleb realized then that to her, he was nothing more than a source of cash. She didn't care that he needed help. On the 5th day, Caleb left the house. He placed the keys on the table and walked out without looking back, with no idea where to go or what to do next. A week later, Sienna returned home. She looked tired, but there was a light in her eyes, hope. The house was clean and empty, like a blank canvas waiting for new colors, new stories. Milo helped her bring things over from their moms. Thank you, Milo, Sienna said, hugging her brother. I honestly don't know what I would have done without you. You're strong, Milo replied. You would have figured it out. But I'll always be here to back you up. Sienna looked out the window. The sun was shining, birds chirped happily outside. She took a deep breath and felt something new stir in her heart, a fresh start. A life without betrayal, without lies. A life full of hope and possibility. Delilah was left with nothing. After losing the house, Caleb had to spend money on a rental and could no longer support her financially. She tried to manipulate him, play on his guilt, but Caleb didn't budge. He finally saw her for who she really was and refused to be her puppet any longer. Delilah had no choice but to move back in with her mother, into the cramped, uncomfortable apartment she'd grown up in. That's when it hit her, her selfish plans and emotional games had brought her nowhere. She had lost everything and was now alone, with 2 kids and a mountain of unresolved problems. Months passed. Sienna started a new job and made new friends. She began to smile again, to enjoy life. One day, she ran into Caleb on the street by accident. He looked older, thinner. His clothes were worn and faded. Sienna, he mumbled when he saw her, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know I made a huge mistake. I lost you. I lost everything. Sienna looked at him with quiet compassion. I forgive you, Caleb, she said gently. But we can't go back. We both need to move on. Caleb nodded and lowered his head. He knew she was right. He'd destroyed what they had, and now he'd have to live with that. Sienna gave him a small smile and walked away. She knew a new life was waiting for her. A life she would build on her own, with her own strength. A life full of love, joy, and hope. She felt free and light, like a bird finally released from its cage.